Welcome to Better Odds Sports Betting. Here's our hosts, Kev O'Neill and Kyle Hunter.
All right, we are back with part 2 of the Circa contest, Circa Millions and Circa Survivor. We have another wonderful guest. My partner in crime, Sean Kanaki, is here. We had some technical difficulties with some echoes in our first one, but we have it fixed for this one. But we have a wonderful guest, the man that makes it all happen, Mr. Vegas Maddie from footballcontest.com. Maddie, thanks for coming on, man. How the heck you doing?
Doing pretty good. Busy Thursday, probably our busiest Thursday of the sign-up season. And hopefully that will follow Friday and Saturday, and we'll get a ton more sign-ups for the Circa Million and Circa Survivor here at Circa Las Vegas.
Yeah, man, that's a lot going on, really, because I looked when I signed up with you as soon as I got here. There was like 2,400 some people already in the millions. I feel like that's more than it was last year, but at the same time, that's only what, 2.5 weeks to make up for the $6 million overlay from the one and only Derek Stevens, who throws this amazing millions contest. The Survivor is up a little bit higher. Where's the Survivor at, Maddie?
Yeah, so the Survivor is like around 4,500 entries right now. It looks like this morning it was 4,320. I'm guessing it's probably closer to that 4,500 number. And that overlay, that puts the overlay at about 3.5 million with 2 weeks left. I think it'll easily get over that number, and we won't have an overlay in the Survivor. The bigger concern for Derek and his team here is the Circa Million, just because, you know, you're right, the numbers are definitely better than last year, but they have to get over 6,000 entries. This time last year, they had a lot less, but they also ended up with about 4,600 entries. So they only had about 2,000 entries left to go. I mean, I don't know what the number was compared to this time last year, but I'm guessing it's at least, 500 more, maybe closer to 1,000 more than it was this time last year. I don't know, but they have to make up still a good amount because I think this weekend you're going to see the overlay in the million and the Survivor catch up to each other. Right now it's about 3.5 million. Like I said, you're looking at, if there's 4,500 in the Survivor, and there was 4,320 this morning, that'll knock it down to 3.5 million. It's about 3.5 million in the million. It's a lot of numbers to throw at you, but basically the Survivor overlay is going to end up going way down. It's gonna catch up, and you're gonna have probably a surplus of extra money that guys are playing for. I think there'll probably be closer to 10,000 entries in that contest, where the 6,000 and the million is still going to be kind of hard to hit.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I think that Survivor's definitely going to go over, and like you said, 45, 46, 4,700 if they're on the same pace as last year, still going to be about a $1.3 million overlay there at the end, probably. So,
just real quick. So, what I was saying was, though, that I don't expect there to be an overlay in the million. Like that number is way ahead of last year. So I think they will end up getting 6,000 entries. So if they do that, they'll break even on the contest. So I just want to be clear on that. It's definitely trending towards way surpassing last year, because they only had 4,600 entries. So they just need about 3,000 to 4,000 entries to do more than they did last year. Actually, 2,000 entries in the million puts them right on where they were last year. So anything over and above that is what they're going to end up getting closer to the overlay, and hopefully they don't end up with an overlay, at least for Circa.
Yeah, but we want them to get all the way there for sure.
Yeah, I just think that I think it's weird that people gravitate more towards Survivor. I almost feel like if the max entries was the same for Survivor and Millions, Survivor's still going to beat it. I scratch my head because we're in a place of sports betting, and Survivor is just straight up luck picking, teams that just might get upset or might not. We care about against the spread at Sports Better. So I guess in my mind, Maddie, I almost feel like Millions is cooler, but I think maybe I'm wrong. I think if you look at the general public and everybody out there, they probably really feel like Survivor is the cooler contest.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick one team straight up every week, you can't use the same team twice, obviously, for those who are not familiar with the Survivor contest. I had a gentleman, one of my clients, who did very well in the Super contest last year, and he cashed some money in the Circa Million a couple years ago. He sat down earlier around lunchtime, and we had a conversation, and he basically had an interesting perspective as far as like how much is luck versus skill. And in the Survivor contest, he said something very interesting. He said, until Thanksgiving time, about 75% of the Survivor contest is luck and 25% is skill. Then if you can get to that point, then it's about 95% skill versus 5% luck after that. So I think that kind of puts it in perspective that like you have to be very lucky to get through about 3/4 of the season in Survivor. Once you get to that point, that's when it kind of separates the men from the boys. If you get knocked out, I mean, it's basically pure luck. I mean, you saw what happened last year. Half the field was gone by week 2 or week 3. And then afterwards, it was all about, can we get to Thanksgiving? Can we get to that first double week elimination where you have to pick a Thanksgiving game and then get through the Sunday games? And then if you got through that, then you had to just pray that you could stay alive a few more weeks, and then you had to hit Christmas. And that was another double elimination. So there's definitely luck involved, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't really heat up until after Thanksgiving, in my opinion.
It's funny. I was just talking to Sean. He does a reverse Survivor, and we just talked about in the earlier show. Some people might have gotten it because of the technical difficulties, but it's so cool that you picked the loser actually of a game this week. It's kind of like the same type of thing, but it's certainly a different mindset coming into it. And you look at Survivor. I do agree with you. I think in the beginning there's a lot of luck, and at the end it's massive strategy. It's you kind of have to think about how many people are going to pick this massive favorite, and you also have to look how many people have that game available too, because some places will have that information and some don't. So you just might want to pick maybe one that's another confident one of yours that you're trying to eliminate other people yet stay alive. So it's tough not to pick the big one, but it's the whole mindset, isn't it, Sean, when you're getting down to that situation?
Yeah, when you get down to it, it really is. I think for me, the whole mentality between the two of them, though, is when you look at it, just as I got to win 20 games, right, in Survivor, or 21 with Christmas and
20,
Thanksgiving, yeah. 20, right? But I got to go 70% on 90 picks to even have a shot at the other one in the millions, right? So you look at that, which one's going to come in easier for you? Is it 20, or am I going to actually get that 73 wins to win the million in the other one? So I like I like picking against the spreads. I think that's where my mentality's always been. But I think the average guy that's walking in here, if he's going to do one entry like you talked about before, he's probably going to gravitate toward that. I only got to get 20 right in a row, and I can win $1 million. So
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot in a row. 20. The whole, and I think Derek might be the first person to do this here at the Circa, to make Christmas its own week. Maybe even make Thanksgiving its own week. I've been in Survivor's contest for years. I mean, before it was cool, right? Usually you're just with buddies and stuff like that. But run by app sites that run fantasy footballs and stuff like that. You can get into like little Survivor contests, and they do it for you. But just having those just think about saving a team. Like, well, the funny thing last year is people saved the Arizona Cardinals until Christmas, and wow, the Cardinals suck. The Kyler Murray's hurt. What now? I'm sure that was a big mind game on some of them coming into this year, Maddie.
No, definitely. And the teams that are being targeted now for those holiday weeks are the Eagles and the Chiefs. Can you hold them that long? And Circa the last few years, they had that added bonus if you held the Super Bowl teams, which is interesting. Until that very last week, Derek gave away an extra $1 million for anybody who held them or did not play them until that last week. He did away with that rule. He got tired of throwing his money away, because I think people, the last 2 years, we had a guy who won $1.5 million and got part of that that bonus. He split it 3 ways. I think it was like 333,000 because he held the Chiefs until the very last week. So, yeah, on paper, the Eagles and the Chiefs look great. But what happens if Jalen Hurts goes down week 1? Then you can almost throw them out the window. Same with Mahomes with the Chiefs. I mean, would they still be good? Yeah, but they're not going to be like that lead pipe lock team that's going to get you through those weeks at that point. Yeah, I remember that game in particular. Were they playing the Vikings? Was it the Vikings and the Cardinals, or who were they playing? I'm trying to remember. Or the Colts? I'm trying to remember. Colts.
I think it was the Colts.
Yeah. So it was like, it seemed like it would be Cardinals all the way, and then it was like almost like practically a pick'em game, right? Yeah, it's just the way it turned out. It's not always what you think. The teams that you think are good, it's kind of like that strength of schedule rule. The strength of schedule is only as good as the teams the year they're playing. The year before means nothing. So I mean, sure, the Chiefs and the Eagles are, defending conference champions and everything like that, but I mean, one injury could really, put a damper on their season and make them where you might want to fade them that week instead.
Yeah, I got knocked last year with the Chiefs and the Colts in my entry. So you just never know where it's going to end, when it's going to end, but that's part of the fun of it, right? And like you said, 20 in a row, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I think this first week is going to be Baltimore, right? I mean, they're the favorite against the Texans. Is that it's like 9.5 points right now? I mean, doesn't that make sense? That thing's probably going to go up and up. I don't know what it's going to take for people to take CJ Stroud against the mighty Ravens at home. But it's interesting that you say this, because I also wonder if maybe it's smarter to take the Chiefs early, because what if Mahomes does get hurt? Maybe it's smarter to take Cincinnati early. What if Burrow does get hurt? It's just another part about strategy. It's like, I burn these teams, but that's just the challenge of it. I want to stay alive for a while. And you also have to wonder, though, is your competition, Maddie, doing the same thing?
No, definitely. I think that's something. When I had this conversation with my client at lunch today, it was trying to figure out the mindset of what your competition is thinking with their pick. And this guy, he was like, he did one Survivor. He's been really good in the Pick 5 contest. He hit like 79% in the second half of the season for the Super Contest last year. And he's doing Survivor this year. And he said, look, I was in a Survivor pool. I've been in Survivor pools, and like, I'm never looking to split. I want to win the whole thing. So if he knew that everyone was going to take a certain team, he would go opposite just to hope that things fall his way in that situation and try to win the $8 million. So I think that's kind of interesting, because yeah, I mean, there's probably other guys in the Survivor pool that have a similar thinking. While the money is great, the first year in the Survivor, 35 people split the pot, and it was not $8 million. So they each got $70,000. Now that's nothing to sneeze at, obviously, but it's also not $8 million. So would you try to be the one person who goes against the grain? I mean, it's interesting, and I think that's like that's got to be the mindset of more than just him in the contest. They want to try to figure out like who the popular teams are. Like, we had a guy who picked the Raiders against. Actually, 2 people took the Raiders against the Cowboys a couple years ago on Thanksgiving, and I thought that was one of the ballsiest picks ever. And they went into Dallas and won that game. So many people got knocked out on Dallas that week, and those 2 guys like were able to move on. Unfortunately, neither one of them got much further than that. But I mean, that's just like one of those mindsets. You have to you look at the public teams. You try to predict who's going to be the big pick every week. Like you said, the Ravens. What about the Eagles and the Patriots? That's another one. I think the Eagles are big road favorites, right, in that game. And who the heck knows? Maybe the Patriots pull out. They still have Bill Belichick on their side. You never know. And maybe they figure out Jalen Hurts in the first game. I don't know. But I think they're going to be a big pick too. And if you can go opposite of one of those big picks and have the balls to do it, then more power to you, right?
Yeah, I would say so, Sean.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have the balls to do it week 1, but I think I'd start to look to Zach if I was still in it, week 13, week 14. Don't be jumping on that big favorite if you got him left. Maybe thin the pool with something else. You never know what's going to happen. So I like that strategy for sure.
I remember the Bears beat the Patriots last year, and that was funny because I didn't pick the Patriots for Survivor, and I was in multiple Survivors that year, and I didn't win, but I made it to the last 100. It's so funny what you say. It's just I watched them. I'm just looking myself Survivors. It's funny. You're so involved in this stuff, but you just know when this upset happens. Sorry, you root for the upset if you're not on it. You do. You want to see it happen. That's just human nature. It's like, go Bears, take them out. And then people pick the Survivors just like, shit, extremely upset. And that's why all the emotion comes with the Survivor. And I guess just that's massively part of the fun of the game, man. It's just so amazing and such a great experience. And coming down to the Circa right here and signing up, you put your money where your mouth is, what we say. If you're great at sports betting, get in the millions. If you think you can pick some games, get in the Survivor and definitely see what happens and see how good you are against the best in the world. So that's always fun. But Maddie, you do a great service for people all over the world, and you just had a guy from Guatemala come in and sign up for the contest. So, I mean, if you're listening here and you want to get in this contest, you take a red-eye flight for $200. How can you get them on signed up?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is just go to footballcontest.com right here. And you'll find out all the information you need on the contest, the rules, how to secure the best proxy in the business, which is footballcontest.com. We're here at Circa this weekend. My partner Tony and I are here 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. We'll be back on Sunday. Pretty much, we don't have a day off at this point. So we're going to be at this casino. There's a satellite sports book for Circa over at the Tuscany off the Strip. We make the rounds there. We also do the Westgate Super Contest. So we're all over town doing this stuff. And you got to get in before, I think it's 2 p.m. on Saturday, September 9th. So you want to get signed up by then. We'll have somebody at the sportsbook every day until then. To me, just email us, proxy@footballcontestproxy.com, or just go to footballcontest.com and get all the information you need. You can prepay your proxy fee so you can keep your cash in your pocket when you're in Vegas, which is also a nice perk. And if you have any questions, we're pretty much available 24/7. We think customer service is the number one thing when it comes to picking a proxy, and this is our 15th year that we've been doing it. So, we think we're doing a pretty good job.
You're doing a fantastic job, man. And that's what it's all about. It's like, there's no excuses here. You can get in many of contests. They take a rake, right? They take 5%, they take 10%. All websites do that, or many websites do that. And a lot of the mainstream sports books, they will take a cut of it, which makes it more a negative EV. But this is positive EV contest, because not only do they give out all the money, if they don't make their overlays, there's more money being paid out than bought in. Obviously, it's that easy. Plus, people give up at the end. They don't play, and you can play for these mini contests, make 150 grand every 4 to 5 weeks, just depending upon which mini contest it is, which week it is. And you're really benefiting from that. So that's what this makes this the best contest in the world. And that's why I sign up every single year, Maddie. So, hey, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate all your work and the great benefit that you put on to our listeners and all the people across the United States. Can you tell us one more time where people can sign up for footballcontest.com?
Yeah, you said it. It's footballcontest.com. Just go there. There's lots of links to check out as far as FAQs, payment information, just information on all the contests. Anything you want to know, we've got it there. We're kind of like your one-stop shop for Vegas football contests. And just go there, check it out. And if you're interested in signing up, reach out to me and we'll get you signed up.
All right. Well, make sure you check out Maddie and Tony. Make sure you check out Maddie and Tony at footballcontest.com. They will certainly set you up and get you ready for your contest season. Now we're going to go on break for 5 minutes, and we'll be back with more football talk from the Circa Las Vegas.
Yeah.
All right. We are back talking some football. Sean Kanaki from the Odds Breakers here, waiting for our next guest. Sean, how was your flight in, my friend?
Hang on, let's try that again with the mute button off. Beautiful flight in from Appleton, Wisconsin. Got in here about 1 o'clock. Derek Stevens and the Circa crew were kind enough to send a car for me, bring me back over here, and jumped right on up, got myself checked in, and here we are. Been doing this for about 2 hours now, talking some football. Looking forward to chatting about some more.
Yeah, man, me too. I was able to get in. I had to drive in, obviously, and I got signed up right away as soon as I got here. It only took about 10 minutes really for me to sign up, fill out the form. They said you hand it in, they call it, they say, okay, we'll call you about. I got up there, opened my water, and all of a sudden they're calling me. It's like, okay, you get your cards, you give your cards to your proxy, and you're all signed up. So that's how easy it is. But Sean, coming into the season, do you have a strategy in mind to try to win this millions contest? Is there something different you're going to do this year from last year?
No, there's some people that talk about let's zig when everybody else is zagging and trying to catch the books off guard a little bit. But, we don't get those lines until they lock in on Thursday. By then, most of the value's out of them. So it's really trying to just dig into my numbers, making sure where I got my power rating set at. If there's a point value on it, I got to continue to play it. And, last year, I think we finished up at 53%, well out of the money. But, that's the same strategy I got to go with. I don't think I can change, getting off my own power ratings. I think I'd be selling myself short by trying to do that. How about yourself?
I'm going to try to find. See, in the beginning, obviously, you don't have a big grips on these teams, and I guess that's my same strategy over the past years. And I always had the good first week. It's always the second week that I got a rebound, and they call it overreaction week, which should be a better week for me, Sean. But sometimes it's not, and that bugs me a little bit. You just got to figure out what to overreact on and what not to overreact on, and that's important. And figure out were these teams for real or did they start bad? I remember one year the Giants went 0-4 and then they won the Super Bowl that year, Sean, and they kind of got it together. Sometimes teams improve throughout the season. I think I'm going to try to look for more improvement throughout the season and look at their last 3 weeks, the numbers on that. And I do that anyway, but sometimes you forget here and you just use your season long power ratings, your season long metrics. Filled into whatever you do. I use an algorithm as well besides power ratings, but I'm going to factor it in. It's like, if those 3 games were against super easy teams, maybe you don't factor it in as much. If those 3 games before were against actually pretty decent teams and they look like for some reason they figured something out, maybe you want to be on it. Maybe you want to rewind the game a little bit, maybe look a little bit what happened. I think if you try to do a deeper dive and see, yeah, I mean, they figured out their secondary a little bit. Their secondary was terrible. Now they're actually covering their receivers. They're picking their spots to, go deep on offense. A lot of that stuff's important, Sean. So I'm going to be a little bit more careful when it comes to recency. Also on the recency bias side, we got to be careful.
So for people that don't do this full time and don't dive into the box scores, excuse me, you do a great piece. The misleading box scores of the week for both college and pro. Really diving into why things went crazy and why that final score might not be the real thing. And I think that certainly helps as you kind of look at the next week coming up. One of our guests hopefully stopping up here shortly, and Ron Ace, they also do a little segment every week where they go through each game and kind of look at what really happened in the game. And your feature and theirs are the 2 that I usually listen to right away on Tuesday or Wednesday whenever they come out, just to kind of guide myself if I didn't get to watch the game or if I didn't see a lot of highlights and dive into that box score. You guys got people covered, and that certainly helps kind of take a look at where those lines really should be the next week coming up.
I'm back. Sorry about that. So, yeah, it's my I do love that segment. I do, Sean. Thanks for bringing that up. And I probably got to listen to it a little bit more to myself, and figure out what's important. A lot of these misleading box scores are bad teams beating good teams. It's like, oh, look at them, and then you can be like, well, they were outgained by 3 touchdowns, but there was 3 turnovers. Now, turnovers are hard to predict, but usually on a bad turnover week, the coach whips them into shape a little bit, and they kind of figure it out a little bit. My misleading box scores, it's always mostly turnover driven in college and pros. It's like that's the biggest thing for a misleading box score is the turnovers in the NFL, which fumbles are hard to predict, but interceptions a little bit more predictable. So, probably keep that in mind a little bit more going into the season. Box score analysis when 2 teams are duking it out. Sometimes it's different when they're rivals. It's like sometimes teams have their number and sometimes they get up for that game, and you can see a team that's been sucking all year. All of a sudden they play their rival who's been doing great, and they literally look like eye to eye. The kid, they play on a different level. You can call it 110%, which is a fictitious number, right? But there's just something in human nature, Sean, that makes some of these teams step up in these situations. So I'm going to pay more attention about matchup history, especially, Sean, when there's the same coach involved, and also maybe when there's the same quarterback.
Yep, year-over-year history definitely plays a part, especially in the same division. You did mention that, and I think as you look at those games, and if you were to take a long look at where those spreads end up, those games end up being one score more often than not, no matter what that talent gap is on those teams when they're playing cross division and cross conference. Usually when those, look at the Eagles and the Cowboys, right? Over the last 10 years, where they end up landing, most of those scores are one-score games. It's like that in almost every division as you go through the box score. So definitely something to think about as you're looking at dogs. If there's somebody that's a big dog talent-wise, maybe a good game to bet them is those interdivision games there for sure. And you mentioned the turnovers and how you can look at those predictable and what is and what isn't. And on the segment with Marco earlier, one of the reasons I was off Dallas and off Dak is, he led the league in interceptions, tied with Davis Mills in 3 less games. And there's some metrics out there that said a lot of them weren't his fault. Well, you're still throwing the ball where it's getting deflected or tipped or hitting right off the receiver's hand somewhere, right? Even if it's a deflected interception. And that's one of those reasons why I'm kind of off the Cowboys. And they had good fumble luck on the other side of the ball where they were actually getting turnovers back on defense. But those are things that you can look at, from previous years and kind of take with you, where they're going to balance out. And if somebody's throwing interceptions, they're probably going to continue to do so if they're getting in trouble, especially as they get a little bit older and stop running as much. So.
Yeah, 100%. Man, there's so many things, and this is what makes football probably the best sport to bet on, because there's just so many different things that can happen. Yet you can almost tell a story when you tell your side of how you think a game's going to go. It's almost like your own story when you handicap a game, right? That's what's kind of fun about it. Scores are usually in sets of 3 and sets of 7. It's so unique in that way that you have to kind of think of when the spread is 3 or 7. Obviously, these are the biggest key numbers, but maybe you can dig a little bit deeper when it comes to teams now more going for 2 and teams using advanced metrics now to not punt as much when they're coming down to the 40-yard line. There's still some boneheaded coaches out there, Sean, they will punt, down like 5 points with 8 minutes left, and they'll punt when they get to the 40 for some reason. But you're going to get that. And, that's another reason why I kind of like coaches, especially early when it comes into the season. I think that's very important. But, more importantly, you listeners out there should come down to the Circa and get signed up and for these amazing contests. They're the funnest thing. And it's almost like, even if you don't bet on sports, you still have skin in the game just by doing it one contest. There, believe it or not, is people that come here that actually do not bet a lot of sports, yet they just love the contest. And they already have a skin in the game. It's almost like you're betting, like $10 a game or so by picking your 5 entries every single week, right? It's just that little additive thing that just makes it so much funner, Sean, doesn't it?
Yeah, when you break it out like that over the course of 90 games, right? That's really what you're doing. But you also have a chance to not just win $10 a game, right? That multiplier is a lot bigger if you happen to cash in the big chips. So there's incentive for that. And if we look at it that way, if you're not a big sports bettor, $50 a week, $10 a game. Certainly something that's doable for most people over the course of the season, or even if they're going down to where I'm from, your local watering hole, and filling out a parlay card for $20 a week or $50 a week. It's the same idea here, except for the potential payout's just a lot bigger, and that's what makes this thing so cool. With Circa Sports and what Derek put together here is unbelievable for both the professional and the average bettor. It's open to everybody, and anybody can win. The group last year, what was five buddies from Michigan, right? That came through there, Kiev. I don't have it with me, but I believe it was 5 guys off of Michigan decided to chip in together and ended up winning the thing.
Yeah, that absolutely happens. That was a while back when Brady did that. It's just such an interesting concept of how you can approach it. I mean, 5 guys, that's $200 a piece. That's not bad at all. I think there's just, if you can't afford 1,000, do 200. When you have 5 minds, it's almost better than 2 minds. Sometimes you have 2 guys in, it's like they can blame each other too much. 5 guys, each guy pick your favorite one. And if you guys have the same favorite one, do your second favorite, right? Maybe you can kind of set it up in that kind of way. I think that's a great strategy and a great way to look at it. Well, let's move back to NFL divisional odds. And one division we didn't touch on too much was the AFC South. Sean, is there a chance that the Jags do lose this? I mean, there's been a little bit more hype with the Titans because of the DeAndre Hopkins addition, which, they needed a receiver. They need a lot of things, but is this the Jags to lose? Do you think these numbers are accurate at Jags minus 155, Titans plus 350, Colts plus 600, and Texans plus 800?
I think the Colts and the Texans should probably be a little bit longer. It's the Jags and the Titans for me. If I had to make a bet here, it would be the Jags land the 155. Tennessee's certainly got a chance at it. If you think about last year with Tennessee, they did end up with a lot of injuries. This is a team that was 7-3 and had a 4-game lead on the division after the bye week, after week 11, and just completely collapsed between injuries and quarterback problems and defensive problems and fumble problems for Mr. Derrick Henry in a couple games there. But they had the division in hand, and I think the Jags got a little bit better. I don't think Tennessee got that much worse. They're just a little older. So if this is a 7-10 team again, sure, I can totally see it, but I could also see them being 7-3 or 6-4 after 10 games right there with the Jags. And the Jags don't have an easy schedule. They're cross-divisional games, and I think it's written down: Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco are their 3 at-large games for Jacksonville. So both teams play the same easy division, but Jacksonville's at-large schedule is significantly harder. If there were 3 teams that I would not want in my at-large, Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco might be 1, 2, 3. So is there a chance Tennessee sneaks in there? Sure. I think the Jags are just a superior team, and I think Trevor Lawrence is just going to keep getting better. I think he's going to be a elite quarterback in the NFL by the end of the year. So if I had to bet it, minus 155 Jags for me.
Not to mention that the Titans really just revamped their whole offensive line, like practically completely. I mean, they're starting from scratch almost from that thing. It's they have a mess going on. No real tight ends there to speak of. Their defense is good, but how good are they? They got gashed by the pass last year. They were one of the worst pass defense in the league last year, Sean. And so it's hard for me to see the Titans beat this Jags. I mean, Trevor Lawrence to me is just like that kid that every dad wants. He's just he's great with the media. He's just positive. He's good with kids from what I've saw so far. I don't hear any bad stories about the dude. He's a total jock. I'm sure he's a total jock in high school, but some guys are just focused on that and not you don't get the other side of it where they're cocky and jerks to everybody. Maybe I have no idea. I'm speaking for Trevor Lawrence, but that's just my perception of him. Everybody can have a perception of somebody, but Doug Peterson's a Super Bowl winning coach. He comes in and kind of straightens things out a little bit. And to be honest with you, they were in that Kansas City game without that fumble at the very 4-yard line, which was just a bad move. And they were possibly going to come back and win that game if it wasn't for that. I mean, really getting back into it, and that killed them right there. Then they ended up scoring a touchdown later, but it was almost too little too late. They were running here. And when the teams the Jaguars had some bad mistakes that they made, but they have the talent there with Travis Etienne. They have some good skill positions there. I just feel like the Jaguars are going to possibly put it together and possibly win the AFC Championship. So that's one bet that I did take, Sean. AFC Championship at 16-1 for the Jags.
Yeah, certainly can see it. And I just like you said about the Titans. There's just too many holes there. I think Vrabel's a great coach, and obviously he held that defense together. But like you said, the passing was the issue. They actually had more pass attempts against them than any other team in the NFL, and that's with them being down the last 7 games when teams trying to run out the clock. So that was definitely their weakness. It will be again. I'm not as high on the Jags as a Super Bowl contender. I just think there's too much in the AFC for them to get through, and I don't think they're quite there yet on the defensive side of the ball. I think Devin Lloyd's an elite player, middle linebacker. I think he's a tackling machine, and it's only going to get better. But I don't think the defense is quite as good as some of those other contenders out there. The Ravens, the Jets, the Bills, the Dolphins. I think all those teams have better defenses than the Jags still at this point. So we'll see. But I don't hate the number you got on it. I mean, if they're in the dance, they got a shot, right?
Absolutely. And I guess it's also based on the fact that they play the Colts and Texans twice and the Titans twice, so you kind of hope that makes up for their AFC, for their Bengals, Bills, and Chiefs. If they can get 2 of those, then yeah, you feeling pretty good. If they get 1 of those, they're not out of it because they can still, beat the Titans twice, beat the Colts twice, and beat the Texans twice. So kind of that was my thought process when coming into it. But yeah, you're right. But another issue is that, you say they're not ready yet. It sucks for that because Trevor Lawrence is going to get paid, right? And that's going to block a lot of money coming back in to retain some of their talent as well as get more talent. You see, I mean, it works with Mahomes and Kelsey because those are the 2 guys they build around. They got a pass catcher and they got Mahomes. They're married to each other. It kind of worked out. With other quarterbacks, it hasn't because Aaron Rodgers would flip receivers. There was one guy that stayed there so long, in my opinion. Trying to think back, there's a couple that stayed a little bit, but Kelsey and Mahomes, you're going to see that for probably 10 years from now, almost. It's crazy how good this combination is. But I hope that the Jags can get it done before they pay Lawrence, because in the football, that's the best thing about the NFL, Sean. It resets everything and makes it very tough to continue that prosperity.
For sure. I mean, there only been a few teams, other than the Patriots, that have been able to get it done in the last 25 years, right? The Patriots did it a bunch. They kept coming back and kept retooling after they paid Brady, and they had a good enough coach and just a good enough defense to get by every time. The guys like Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes are few and far between, right? But could Joe Burrow become one? Sure. But could Joe Burrow become Dan Marino and be the guy that made it to a Super Bowl his first year and never back again? Also a possibility. I also think, looking at this division, just talking the Colts and Texans, since we already glazed over them pretty quick, I think both of those teams are in for a rough ride. The Texans with the top draft pick, get the number 2 and 3 pick overall. You get your franchise quarterback potentially, but you had the 30th ranked offense and 31st defense. I might be mixing those 2 up one way or another, but those 2 teams are just going to be in for a rough ride. And Anthony Richardson, a guy that barely completed 50% of his passes in college, is going to be a starting NFL quarterback and become a franchise guy for the Colts. I'm just not seeing that. So I think both of these teams have a lot to do yet to turn it around, and the Texans are like year 5 of the rebuild after Watson, right? So they've missed a lot on the draft the last few years too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am not an AR-15 fan, and I mean, they look at him like a Cam Newton, but how long does that last? I mean, he's got to pass the ball to be able to run it. Otherwise, they're just going to stack the boxes against them and stop that dinking and ducking. I remember Jamarcus Russell came into the league. Now, I'm not ready to compare Anthony Richardson to Jamarcus Russell yet, but it was kind of the same thought process of this type of quarterback coming in. Shane Steichen was from the Eagles. So, it worked with Jalen Hurts, but so it should work with him. Well, Jalen Hurts was a good passer. Jalen Hurts was a clutch performer. Anthony Richardson lost a lot of college football games,
Jamarcus Russell was a good passer. in college anyway. I mean, he certainly had a lot more form and a lot more pedigree than what Richardson's coming out with. I mean, you think about some of those highlights. There's the one against Kentucky where he threw that 70-yard bomb deflection catch and run it in for a touchdown, which burned me, by the way. But that's why it probably sticks in my head. But he was an accomplished passer. He could throw the ball all over the field. He was huge. Anthony can run. Maybe they'll set up some stuff for him where he's going to be able to run around. They were able to do it in Philly with Hurts, like you said, but I'm not seeing it. I think those two teams are.
Yeah, no denying it, man. Let's move to the NFC North real quick. Let's talk about that. The Lions are plus 140. The Vikings are plus 275. The Bears are plus 400. And the Packers are plus 400 as well, man. The NFC North, it's hard to be a fan of the Bears because all this hype you're always dealing with Chicago fans, and they're just all over the place. You should see them with the Cubs screaming that we didn't sign guys, that are potential injury prones. I mean, this Ohtani thing I hate it for Ohtani because I really love the player, but it's blessing in disguise for these Cubs fans that are screaming to pay him $600 million. It's like, you don't believe the media, the fandom in Chicago is just out of control. And it's the same thing with the Bears, but now the Bears, they say, oh, Justin Fields ran the ball a long time, so he's going to be amazing. Well, I'm pretty sure that teams are going to somewhat expect that. I mean, we see a guy in Justin Fields that had a terrible completion percentage. Now, I will say that they didn't have a lot to throw to because Claypool got hurt early. Mooney got hurt early. They add some guys now, and their offensive line is the same mess right now, being that it's injured at least until week 1, maybe week 2. So Tevin Jenkins is hurt. Wright is hurt. You hope that these guys can make it back. I'm not sure if they're talking Jenkins might be week 2 or 3. But I just feel like there's too much hype for the Bears. And I hate to say it, but the Packers, man, at plus 400, if there was a bet I was going to make for a future, it'd be the Packers because they have the running game that's all they need to do to beat the Bears and the Vikings and some of these teams. The Lions had a terrible run defense, slow the game down. And if they have a good coach in LaFleur, I think LaFleur, could be the best coach in this division, maybe. Dan Campbell did a great job with the Lions, but you have to remember that the Lions defense was terrible last year. And the Lions, what do? In the draft, they draft Gibbs. They draft an offensive guy, and it's like, what already? So you scratch your head on what the Lions are doing, and they don't seem to be putting the Band-Aids on where they need them. And the Bears way overhyped right now. And maybe they do make a step forward, but if the Bears, Sean, are going to take a step forward, you're going to see something that Fields didn't do last year. It's be a dang good quarterback. So I'm hoping to see it this year, but I doubt it.
I don't think you're going to see it. And I think this is, one of the things that concerns me with CJ Stroud is Ohio State system quarterbacks that have come out of that offense since Urban Meyer took over have not made that transition to the NFL successfully as a passer. I think Stroud's got the best shot just because he wasn't as much of a heavy runner as some of the other ones that have come through, including Fields. But they got a little bit of help on the offensive line. Like you said, it's hurt. Darnell Wright should be a decent player for them. They upgraded the wide receiver with DJ Moore, go alongside Mooney. I think that's a solid 1-2 combo. But unless Mr. Fields figures out how to throw that ball down the field further than 10 yards on a regular basis with accuracy, teams are going to stack up. And, yeah, he's going to scramble, and he might run for 100 yards a game and 120 yards a game or whatever it might be. But when you're only putting up another 150 yards in total offense beyond that, you're just not going to win football games. And their defense obviously improved a little bit. They spent 7 to 10 draft picks on defense this year. But I don't think they upgraded the unit enough to even compete in this division. And I'll give this one out. This was one of the ones I was definitely on the under for at 7.5. I think they're hyped up, like you said, by the Chicago fans with Ohtani. And I am playing the Bears under 7.5. I don't think they're going to get to be close to a 500 football team this year. Sorry, Kev.
Ooh, you're killing me. It sucks to agree with you. I don't know. I think there's upside with the Bears, and Fields would have to stay healthy and be a different quarterback. But Ohio State quarterbacks, they've always been bad, as you said, as I said many times, and because they have a system where the play develops in 3 or 4 seconds, then they throw the ball. You've seen Dwayne Haskins throw the ball like that. You've seen Pryor. You've seen all these old Ohio State quarterbacks. Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, the newer ones too. plays develop and then they hit the crossing route. Well, there's not a lot of crossing routes that get to develop for you. I mean, that's the big problem. It's not the same offense, and they have to learn to get rid of that ball fast. And if you don't have a quick release like a Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow, then you can actually get smoked in the NFL. I think that's important to have a quick release, right? Fields' release wasn't all that big. It's kind of long, and that's something that you have to worry about. I would definitely take the under, but I guess I remain hopeful for Fields, but I usually try not to sports betting cloud my judgment. My thoughts are this: I want to get an 8. If I can get an 8, I'm going to look for an underplay right away on them and see what happens. But the Packers, on the other hand, they look great, but is Love that good or that bad? I don't know. It's weird that they've got rid of Aaron Rodgers finally. And are they sure? Did they get rid of Aaron Rodgers because he's a pain in the ass, Sean? Or they get rid of Aaron Rodgers because they really think Love can do something? Well, I think it's definitely a little bit of both, but maybe might be more towards the pain in the ass part. And that's what worries me.
Yeah, I haven't experienced the Packers doing this twice now in the last 15, 16 years as our next esteemed guest comes wandering up. How you doing? I think the Packers made the decision both times, both Favre and Rodgers, that they'd had enough of the BS, the offseason jerking around, not knowing what their plan was. And when they drafted Love, 3 years ago with round 1, the writing was on the wall for Rodgers at that point. If they had anything after the first year or second year that he was running, they were getting rid of Rodgers. And they obviously think they do. It's preseason, but watching a few of the preseason games, his reads have been good. He's thrown a couple of nice touchdown passes in the short time he's been in there. He's also made a couple boneheaded throws too, but I think he's going to be serviceable enough where as they transition through, they have the same offense they had last year. They're going to run the ball with Jones and Dillon, and they got one receiver that's going to stretch the field. They haven't really changed anything. So Love's got to be at least 80% of Rodgers for them to do what they did last year. And if they can handle that, they should be a 7-10, 8-9 football team. And if things go their right way, maybe they challenge the Lions for the division. But I'm not going to proclaim Love the next Aaron Rodgers until I see it. So,
well, obviously great takes here, and somebody's stealing our lighters that we're giving away right now. Oh, that's our next guest here, Las Vegas Chris here. So let me pause this for another quick break, and when we come back, we'll have Las Vegas Chris on the Odds Breakers at the Circa for you. All right, we are back, and we have our guy Las Vegas Chris talking some contests right now. I'm really excited to talk to Chris. He's done extraordinarily well in these NFL contests, and Chris was a great guest of ours last year as well. But Chris is back, and he's at the Circa right now. Chris, how the heck you doing?
Oh, getting here was just a nightmare with the traffic. It's just a joke. But I'm in.
Awesome stuff, man. The traffic is terrible, but so what are you thinking for this year? Are you going to get into this contest, or are you looking at some others as well?
I will get into the millions, of course. I will get into gold, and I will get into super contest. This super contest season wins for the first time, and last man standings, of course. Had some good luck there. I'm going to skip Survivor. Just my brain doesn't function well with those.
Yeah, we just talked about that. Survivors can be its own animal because it ruins your thinking of against the spread almost in a way. But there's people that do it both, and some people probably can do it better than me personally. Than thinking both ways. Too many contests could be too many distractions, but you definitely get into a lot of them. But the last man standing is also a very cool contest. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
I think it's the very best contest format that's out there because it keeps every single game in play every single week. You lose, you're out. It's that simple. And we've won it a couple of times, had a couple of second place finishes, but it's so simple, it's ridiculous. You can pick any game. Every game has a point spread, so every game is in play, and you don't have 90% of the people on 17-point favorite every week, and you use about half the field every week. And even with 8,000 people, the contest ends by week 13, 12. So you're going to for sure see one winner, and that's what I really like about it.
Yeah, man. So you're against the spread in these contests, and it's almost like Survivor, but you're actually standing. It's a sports betting contest, being that there's spreads with football. So it's a really cool type of football contest. Well, let's pivot back to the big daddy of them all, the Circa Millions here, Chris. Strategy is such an interesting thing to talk about because it changes throughout the year. Could you give us an example of how strategy could change for you depending upon how you start?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was fortunate enough to finish second and fifth, and only 65% of the selections matched between the two entries. I started off with one of the entries that was so bad that I actually considered the booby prize for a moment. But you just don't chase booby prizes. You just never do unless you just accidentally basically are there near the end. But I had to use an entirely different strategy of go for broke on that one that started off poorly. And I just used entirely different games than I normally would have. I used bigger spread games. I used just everything different. Everything was different, and it was actually quite amusing. And I think I won the fourth quarter with that one too. So it was fun. It was a fun ride.
Yeah, man, that is awesome. Going second and third in one contest, that is absolutely insane. But you used a different strategy, which is kind of important for people to think about. Sean, man, what do you think about Chris's success here at the contest? And how hard is it to, come up with this kind of strategy when you're playing these against thousands of people?
I think what you've been able to do, Chris, is pretty incredible because you've done it across multiple casinos and multiple different contests, which not a lot of people can say. You can have one good year, right, and hit a bunch of stuff and make things happen and win a big prize, but you've proven it across a couple different things, and that's pretty amazing. We were talking before you got here about your weekly recaps with Ron and how you guys kind of go through and evaluate teams and whatnot. I think that obviously plays a large part with you guys rehashing everything right away at the end of the week, making sure you know what was for real, what things went wrong for teams, and then using those strategies to make your picks going forward. I think a lot of people that are getting into these contests just look at the board and kind of throw a dart with whatever their heart feels is the right pick. And you guys are actually doing all the hard work, the analyzation, grinding the numbers, and that's what it takes to do what you've done, and it's incredible. So congratulations on all that.
Well, thank you. You'd actually be surprised, though. First of all, it takes a hell of a lot of luck. So there's, I've been very, very fortunate, and I'm a huge underdog to even make it in the money this year. So, let that be known. That there's a lot of other players that know how to play just as well as I do. Some maybe even better. And if you don't get the breaks, you're not going to make it. But you just said something which is actually the opposite, which I think hurts people. I'm not overanalyzing this stuff. In fact, I recommend doing the opposite. I think the biggest mistake people do is that they do think about it all week long, and they just digest and redigest, and it's bad. It does not work. I can tell you unequivocally, every single week, I didn't know who I was putting in until about 20 minutes before the deadline, and honestly didn't know even before I picked up and entered the app and made my selections. And in fact, I missed 2 deadlines, which still left me time, but that's how close I was to the deadlines on making decisions.
Yeah, it's funny. I find myself getting talked off good plays because I listen to way too many podcasts sometimes. Maybe you can think about that, but it's really frustrating. It's like, man, I thought I saw something, then somebody I respect, even it doesn't even mean you don't respect this person, but it's just I'm talked off something and that really upsets me because I left a winner off the board and I took a loser in some cases. How do you do that, Chris? How do you digest like other media and other podcasts and stuff like that, and still be able to hold yourself accountable to make your plays?
Well, you actually kind of answered your own question, because you do it by just absorbing the information and not overthinking it all week long. If you just absorb information throughout the week and you wait until you have to, make your decisions, then you're not absorbing what your predisposition to want to absorb or want to reflect, so to speak. Now, we all know if you have models and such, there's always going to be 1 or 2, maybe 3 games that you're for sure going to be on no matter what. But, the huge difference is, what are you going to do with those 1, 2, or 3 remaining games? And if you can keep a clear head and kind of be able to look at the options, before you have to pick, I don't know how to explain it. There's just a different clarity if you have an open mind and you just sit there and go, what stands out? What, does this play? What makes sense? And if you go up and down the list a few times and you eliminate, I think it's easier to go backward and eliminate. I'm not on this game, and now I'm down to considering 6 games. Okay, well, out of these 6, there's no way I want anything left to do with this one. Now we're down to 5, and go backward and basically see what you're left over with. That was oftentimes the way that I made my selections.
Yeah, I think that going backwards piece of it is definitely the way to go about it. You get to. I'm kind of an action junkie, so I actually start out with a pretty big card and then kind of work down from that. But usually, what I start at is I'm looking at, making my initial selections. I might have 10 or 11 games, but very quickly as the week goes along, you knock 1, 2, or 3 off. And I think that's a great way to go about it rather than just going, I love this one right away. I think it's getting rid of those ones that you shouldn't be on is a great way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean that makes total sense. Process of elimination. Well, let me put you in this scenario then. Let's say you have the lead in a contest by 2 or 3 games, and you're coming up to your final 2 weeks. You might the brain wants you to start panicking probably, and maybe like, oh my God, I don't want to be a public bettor and stuff like that. Is that the easier route? Like, I'm ahead and I'm just going to go about my business, or is there strategy to being ahead at that position, Chris?
I can tell you that my best success has always been coming from behind or with the fewest chances left. I think it's much harder to have the lead. Last man standing, I had 4 of the remaining 20 entries one year, like three years ago. Lost them all the same week. It's impossible. Then last year or the year before when we won it, I was down to 1 entry week 3. Didn't give it a second thought. I just made sure that I was focused and I put very little thought into it. And then all of a sudden I noticed, wait a minute, there's only like 60 people left. I've made my way through here. So I think it's better to have fewer entries, believe it or not, because you'll be better focused, because you end up subconsciously spreading out your best plays between the two, it just changes the way you're going to have game selection, because you make mental compromises of how you're going to divide those options. It dilutes the process, and I don't know whether I've explained that well, but if you just have if you just focus on as little as possible, I think you're better off.
Great stuff. That makes sense. Now, what if like you're in a situation where you're down about 2 or 3 picks, right? You're in the top 50. You're probably going to make something, hopefully, unless disaster happens. There's consensus that you can try to predict, and sometimes it's easy because the line moved a half point or a point off, and maybe you even do agree with that line move. Are those maybe some games you want to stay away from because you know the consensus is going to be on it, and maybe try to find creativity in other places? How do you make that kind of judgment at that position?
You know what? I think it's going to be different with each game, each week, because a lot of people will say if you want to gain ground, go the opposite of the most popular sides that you can all figure out. But I think it's also an advantage to just stay away from it, because you're basically getting, why do you have to go against that? Because if that backfires, now you just went, more behind. You can still get the same effect by just avoiding the game and rooting for them to lose, and then you can still win that because you're still fading them, but you can still win someplace else choosing a different game.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm gonna switch gears on you real quick. How do you look at week 1 games before you get a lot of information going into the season? How do you go evaluate and kind of take a look at, okay, here's the board week 1. Where do I want to try and look at this? Where do I want to go?
You know what? I rely on my models heavily, and my models don't kick in until week 4. Believe it or not, actually, my best results are week 1 and 2 somehow. So I guess I'm just, cautious. I don't just jump in, and I think it's very important to do the market reading. And if you're reading the market, you start to smell what the right games are and what doesn't make sense and what makes sense. It's really hard to explain, but games, if you're watching the market develop in any week, at some point, games start to stand out as like in certain ways, and you've got to decide why they do. But I don't want to sit there and dive in. I try not to bet a lot of stuff the first couple of days.
Last question, and this should be obvious. How long do you want to wait to put your picks in for each week on the contest?
Well, as I mentioned, last possible minute. Why wouldn't you? Although I will tell you one thing, I think last year was the first year I played the Super Contest because they had taken a rake out previously, and they have a much later deadline. And so with more information, I know I wasn't the only one, but I did worse in that one. The more information and whatever happened after the Circa deadline didn't help me at all. So what do I know?
Well, you know a ton, Chris, man. And, that's why you've been so successful and so renowned in this. And yeah, last minute possible. I remember when the Vikings announced Cousins was out. I think it was 2 years ago, but the line moved about 7.5 points, and that happened like on Saturday, right in midday. And lots of people probably put their picks in and went for that Thursday game, Chris. And I mean, how important does the Thursday game have to be for you to go in early?
I use the Thursday game once or twice a year. It would be once probably if I had one entry. But there's just too many things that can happen. For me to use a Thursday game, it has to be one of my top 1 or 2 plays in a week. Or the other selections I know are just so dreadful. And it's such slim pickings. By default, I have to use it. But again, only once or twice a year.
Chris, man, you've been impeccable. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking some contests with us. We really appreciate it. You have a little YouTube channel and some stuff going on. Where can our listeners and viewers get your great information?
Yeah, my Las Vegas Chris YouTube channel is filled with lots of free content loading up. And it just came across Twitter recently. I have a new project with, of all people, Steve Fezzik and I. And Jared Smith will be the trio for Bet US NFL this fall. I'm looking forward to that. Interesting combo, to say the least.
That's fantastic. Make sure you guys are tuning into that. Chris has a ton of great media over his YouTube channel as well. So if you want to learn about contests and how to win at football, you should be following Las Vegas Chris at Las Vegas Chris. Thanks again for coming on. And Sean, thank you. And we're going to end our show today with all this and this great information that we're able to share for you. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Make sure you guys tune in. We're going to have some more great guests to talk about these wonderful contests and these amazing shows that Derek Stevens puts on. Everyone enjoy the night and go get some winners.
Thank you for watching Better Odds Sports Betting.